Next, it is the dawn of a new era in South African politics. After 3 decades of dominance, the African National Congress has struck a deal to form what they're calling a government of national unity. It comes after the ANC failed to win an absolute majority in parliament for the first time in 30 years. The deal saw lawmakers re-elect Cyril Ramaphosa for a second term as president. For some analysis on this new chapter, we can bring in William Gumede, the founder and executive chair of the Democracy Works Foundation. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. First, just how significant is this national unity government, notably that alliance between the ANC and their longtime rival, the DA?
No, thank you for having me. I mean, this is an extraordinary moment in South Africa's modern politics. I mean, the ANC has been in power for 30 years. It really dominated our politics, our society, and also the state. And finally, I mean, the ANC dropped to 40% in the general elections, but the opposition parties together have been unable to put a government together because in normal circumstances, if the opposition gets 60% and the former governing party gets 40%, the opposition puts a government together. So in our case, unfortunately, for the opposition to put their own government together, they needed to bring in some anti-constitutional parties like former President Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto weSizwe party and then the Economic Freedom Fighters of Julius Malema, another former youth league leader of the ANC. So that was impossible to put together a government with these two parties. And therefore the Democratic Alliance and the Inkatha Freedom Party and other opposition parties joined the ANC in a government of national unity. And a government of national unity is different from an ordinary coalition government. It is just that a GNU, as we call it, is a power sharing on an equal basis with the ANC.
And to what extent do all of these parties actually see eye to eye? For example, the ANC is the historic party of Nelson Mandela. The DA, meanwhile, has a reputation for defending the interests of white minorities in South Africa.
Just the first thing, I mean, there's really a couple of challenges. I mean, the DA and the Inkatha Freedom Party and Freedom From Plus are part of an 11-party, multi-party charter, so South Africa's first pre-electoral or pre-election coalition of opposition parties. So that as a collective, they're a collective. So that's the first challenge. Although, I mean, it focuses on the DA and the IFP, that is forming the coalition with the ANC. They're actually part of a bigger opposition party, a coalition. And I think the thing that will hold them together is focusing on the Constitution, the ultimate law. I mean, there are many parties in South Africa that oppose the Constitution. So I think that's the one thing that's going to hold it together. Secondly, would be in terms of the challenge is going to be if the government of national unity is too big, if there are too many political parties in it, it's going to be very unwieldy. I mean, for now, it seems to be a manageable size of parties in there. But I think the important thing is how they're going to do this co-governing business, how they're going to do it, and will the ANC be able to compromise, because it has been used to be in charge of government, and now it will have to be sharing government at every level, whether it's foreign policy, economic policy, or working with business, because the DA and the IFP want to work with business, where the ANC was anti-business. They don't want to work with business. So these are some of the challenges they're going to have to deal with.
And just finally, briefly, how would you describe the mood in South Africa, after this announcement? How are people seeing this unity government?
I think it's a very hopeful mood. I mean, people have been calling for the ANC to become more accountable and more responsible as a government and to listen to people. But the ANC has been very complacent. I mean, 30 years in power. And in the past, many of the ANC voters just voted for it based on this past record. So it meant the ANC had no incentive to be responsible or to be accountable or to deliver services, because people continue to vote for them. So why would they deliver services? Because they like former President Jacob Zuma said that the ANC would be there until Jesus comes. I mean, he was like that. And I think people are now much more hopeful, much more excited. It's a hopeful mood in the country. I think it's the best scenario, and many people understand that this is the best scenario for South Africa. It brings the main political parties into one government to govern inclusively for all South Africans. It could have been worse. It could have been the ANC in a coalition, for example, with anti-constitutional parties like the EFF and former President Jacob Zuma's Mkhonto weSizwe. I mean, that would have been a total disaster, and that would have tanked South Africa's economy. I think people are much more hopeful for this government of national unity because it does bring business, civil society also into the loop, because it's also a pro-business, pro-civil society, and pro-professionals and that they will bring as part of the governing package.
I'm glad people are hopeful, and hopefully this new government will deliver. William Gumede, thank you again so much for your analysis. That's William Gumede, the founder and executive chair for the Democracy Works Foundation.